PJ Fleck looking to right the wrongs from a 5-7 finish, although they do have a bowl game due the Gophers as the only under 500 squad in college football that will stay alive in the postseason. Got Daniel House here from Gophers Guru to break down Minnesota football for us one day after National Signing Day. Daniel, good to have you with us as always.
Mark, good to see you. I like the swagger you got going there. You got the voice of college football, a quarter zip. That's pretty sweet.
We've got our site, we've got our gear lined up so everybody can do some late holiday shopping, I guess, at this
Love
point.
it.
Certainly, we will provide those links for everyone, and glad you noticed. Well,
Yeah, love it.
at some point when we can expand down the road, maybe we'll have Minnesota gear.
Fans
We
will be
have
flocking. The fans will be flocking for that gear.
we have taken off on a few teams, but we'll get to Minnesota at some point. This recruiting class, as you mentioned, was pretty well buttoned down early. However, there was one key player out there that needed to be secured in the final day.
Yeah, Coy Parrott. It came down to the last minute. Ohio State late surge, Florida State offer coming in. Esco, Minnesota. Mark, 2,100 people in the town on the North Shore of Minnesota. Pretty rare to find a prospect with that talent up in that area of the state. So, Minnesota found him early, identified consistency over a 2-year period recruiting him. And then the offers started to roll in. Ryan Day's coming up there last weekend to see Coy and give his last pitch. But ultimately, Coy decided Minnesota was the best fit for him. And, you look at his game, just explosive defensive back who's really versatile on both sides of the ball, can align in the deep half, work around the line of scrimmage, come into the slot and work in coverage. Just the movement skills and the athleticism, 40-inch vertical, 10'6" broad at 6'1", 200 pounds. So track background as well. Family has bloodlines athletically, and his brother plays wide receiver at Minnesota State Mankato. So Minnesota able to lock down the big player in state despite the late charges from some big programs.
As we make our way, Daniel, down the list, who are some of the guys that stand out for you, regardless of where they're ranked?
When you look at being able to get top players in each of the states, Nathan Roy from Wisconsin going in and getting an offensive lineman that, the Badgers have done a good job, and when they've been consistent at getting top offensive linemen to stay and play for them. So to go in and get Nathan Roy it was a big win, a developmental prospect for Brian Callahan to work with, a large frame, and does a good job of activating hips and hands, driving defenders off the ball, but he moves well in space too. His brother Benjamin plays offensive line at UCLA, so it's a family thing. Shot put background, 60 feet at the WIA D1 State Track and Field Championships, and that was something that was a theme throughout this class. Shot put, wrestling, two things that Minnesota definitely look for in the class. Riley Sunram, another player out of North Dakota, defensive lineman. Interested to watch his developmental path. 81-inch wingspan, just a well-built defensive lineman who does a good job of getting leverage versus blocks and deconstructing. And I also think he's got some potential once he tunes up the technique side of it. We'll see kind of what path he follows as he gets in the strength and conditioning program, but was a very good camp performer when I saw him work out live, and then Minnesota ultimately ended up offering him. I would say the other highlight here is Drake Lindsey, quarterback out of Arkansas. Interesting tie here. Drake Lindsey's grandfather, Jim Lindsey, played for the Vikings under Bud Grant back in the day, special teams ace. So it was a big connection point in the process of recruiting Drake. Minnesota identified him. He suffered a patella tendon tear as a freshman playing basketball, missed his sophomore season, came back, had a really good junior season and a fantastic senior season, 52 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions, top player in player of the year in the state of Arkansas. And I got to see him work out in person too. Anticipation and accuracy are two traits that I noticed, being able to throw receivers open and do some good things in the red zone with ball placement, moving defenders, and also very poised, moves well in the pocket and is intentional with his movements, does a good job of setting his feet while moving outside of the pocket. So Drake is someone Minnesota identified early. Arkansas tried getting in there later, but Drake said he was fully committed to Minnesota, and that's a credit to their staff for going out and finding Drake. I think he's a developmental quarterback that they're very excited about that fits their scheme.
Daniel, I got to say, I hang on every word that you say, but when you mention Bud Grant, my ears really perk up because as a guy that's got a few years on you, I caught the end of Bud Grant's illustrious career. Of course, an NFL legend, CFL legend, basketball legend, guy that could do it all. And of course, led the Vikings to 4 Super Bowls, the Purple People Eaters. And the last time we saw Bud Grant, most of us were, it was that. I believe it was the Seattle playoff game, was it not, around 2015 when it was like 9 below zero and Bud Grant's out at midfield with his shirt sleeves on at 90 some years old? Just a remarkable sight.
Well, yeah, the Gopher too, as well. Played
Yes.
football, basketball, baseball, an outstanding athlete from Superior, Wisconsin, and a legend up in Minnesota. It was cool being around the football scene for a while and being at events with Bud. I was actually at the last public event that Bud was at before he passed away, and he was up there for an hour telling stories about things he'd never talked about before. He said, "I've never shared this story before."
Mm.
And I'll never forget that night. I mean, Bud had so much insight, storytelling, and sharp up until the end. So he's definitely still making an impact on the football scene in Minnesota, which is pretty cool.
This is roughly a top 35 to 40 class in the nation, and that's pretty
Hmm.
much where PJ Fleck has lived once he's established his program at Minnesota. Before we get to the transfers, Daniel, uh, are you pretty pleased with the class? Do you think they hit their objectives reasonably?
Yeah, I think they hit their objective of, trying to improve depth overall. PJ Fleck believes in 4-year recruiting as the foundation for your roster while also dashing in the transfer portal, finding those pieces you need, treating the portal like the NFL draft or the 4-year recruiting like the NFL draft and the portal like free agency. So you kind of fill in the gaps with the portal as needed. In this class, the big priority was to be able to get athletic ability, versatility in the secondary, some mismatched skill sets in the passing game. You look at like a Jacob Simpson from Iowa, who I'm very intrigued by, a springy, long athlete with good movement skills and body control. Getting him out of Iowa, I'm surprised that that Iowa usually locks down that border with the tight ends. So being able to get Simpson was definitely a nice get. I mean, there's a lot of players in this class that have developmental potential, athletic traits, wingspans and frames was definitely something they looked at. Wrestling background, shot put, like I said, multi-sport athletes. The goal is to create depth and retool some position groups through the portal and 4-year recruiting. And running back was one of those spots too. Able to get 2 commits in the running back room and 4-year recruiting, and then add Bangura, a transfer from Ohio. So, Minnesota knows they need to get better depth, and they're doing that by trying to strike the balance between 4-year and transfer portal.
So we'll take off on that transfer portal. 8 of them coming in. You mentioned the running back coming in from Athens, Ohio, the Bobcats of Ohio University. Your thoughts about what they've hit on in the transfer portal and what may lie ahead?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the transfer portal. One of the big things is getting quarterback Max Brosmer from New Hampshire, one of the top quarterbacks in the FCS. Ethan Kelly-Manis at the transfer portal. Minnesota went after Brosmer right away, offered him, and then Ethan hit the portal. Brosmer watched all of his games, went through, evaluated everything, and what I saw was accuracy, ability to process, very good in the red zone with ball placement. The blitz versus the blitz was something I saw on film. I'm like, man, this guy is very good at identifying the blitz and throwing against pressure. And went and looked at the numbers, and they were outstanding. You can go read my breakdown on Brosmer talking about all the different things that I saw. But Minnesota knew that they needed to go out and try to, you know, get a quarterback in that room with some experience that fit the system. The other cool thing about the transition here is that he worked in a similar offense, mid and inside zone scheme, some RPO, some play action under center look. So I think the transition into Minnesota's offense will be pretty strong. We mentioned running back with Bangura, a longer frame running back. able to take advantage of things that are blocked up, played in his own scheme, so that makes sense for transition. They wanted to add another cornerback opposite Justin Wally. Went with Ethan Robinson out of Bucknell. I think he's a solid zone corner. Had some previous ties to cornerbacks coach and co-DC Nick Monroe, so able to secure that during the recruiting process. Deontay McMillan's another player from TCU, played in the CFP playoffs against Michigan the previous season, used in kind of a passing down slot role, but also has experience on the outside, so he can play safety, nickel, and corner. So the goal was to try to get some depth in the transfer portal, and Minnesota did that by identifying some players that were at the lower levels that are maybe looking to ascend up.
Daniel, you mentioned the Cal Cubanis departure. That's where I was headed next. And then you also outlined the profile from Brosmer, the incoming transfer. Do you think Minnesota's 2024 starting quarterback is on campus in this room right now, or do you think they'll continue to look around the nation?
Absolutely, Brosmer is the guy that's probably going to be the starter entering the season. They also brought in Logan Fife, a transfer from Fresno, started 6 games there, so he's got some experience, appeared in some games as well. A dual threat player with a little mobility, can move and extend the play, design quarterback runs or something that he can do as well. Flashed a little bit on film in the passing game as well within some of the concepts. The thing I liked about Fife is the fact he's worked with some good offensive minds, and Jeff Tedford, Ryan Grubb, Kalen DeBoer over the years. So definitely has a good track record from the fundamental and processing side of things, just understanding the game. So Minnesota's QB room, you look at those 2 guys, plus Drake Lindsay, who I mentioned earlier coming in. Brosmer's got 1 year. You play Brosmer this year. Fife learns and grows and provides backup. And then you have Fife and Drake Lindsay for 2025. You can kind of ease Lindsay along and see where he's at and determine the path forward. So they retooled that quarterback room this offseason through the portal.
As you mentioned, Fife, 224 pass attempts in his career. So he's played quite a bit of football, completing 64% of his passes. The TD to pick ratio, not what you would want at this point at 6-9, but he provides depth and will compete for the job, apparently. Any NFL decisions that we're awaiting from this Minnesota team?
Yeah, we're still kind of waiting to see who's going to play in the bowl game. So that's like the biggest challenge to project some of these games, is because you just don't know who's going to be there. You got Tyler Newman, you got Brevin Spanford, who are both players that'll be at the Senior Bowl from the Gophers. So we'll see what their decisions are as well. Corey Crooms announced he's declaring for the NFL draft, but he will play in the bowl game. So we don't know a lot of availability when it comes to who's going to be on the roster for the bowl game, which I think makes it hard to project. But that's strategy. Not giving the other team any insight on who could be available and what's coming their way.
Absolutely. Daniel House does an exceptional job. You guys can hear it here on occasion, but you'd want to take the daily run through Minnesota football, also the Vikings as well. Follow Daniel on Twitter /X. You can do that there, Daniel House MN. And what's going on there at Gophers Guru these days?
Well, actually just posted the other day a full 2024 recruiting guide. I think it's like 4,000 total words. You get access to it if you're a subscriber, $5 a month. Not only that, but all the content that comes along with the website. So that's like game previews, player analysis on roster additions, off-season content, giving you some stuff to look at, maybe to view the game a little bit differently, features on players and coaches, and just a little bit of a next-gen approach to Gopher football coverage. So you can check it out on the site, gophersguru.com.
All right, Daniel. I always call on you for a reason. Great stuff, as always, sir.
Appreciate it. Always love talking ball with you.